Hello folks, it's time for episode number 4 of Let's Read. My name is Derek Falska, or at Crease and Assist on Twitter. Again, we have another gem for you as I promised last time. This is a magazine that was borrowed to us by our friend Aaron, or at Angry Finn on Twitter, also kind of the founding member of 3 in the Box. He has borrowed to us this wonderful Minnesota North Stars program that dates back to January 17th, 1991, and you can see it in all its beautiful glory. Please note, just since the year, this would be the year of that little miracle playoff run that they had to the Stanley Cup Finals, their last Stanley Cup run until of course they left Minnesota. And you can even see a little bit of a hint of that with the program itself. You can see that it doesn't say North Stars, it actually just says Stars. So you can start to see some of the hints of what was to come. So, shall we dig in? So we open up first page and we have Always a Great Play, Minnesota, the Midwest Sports Channel. Again, I mentioned last time, kind of like your precursor to Fox Sports Net, where basically they're your regional cable channel for all your local sports teams. And you can see the Twins, University of Minnesota Gophers, the North Stars, and the National Hockey League. Since this is a game program, they went away from those gold magazines. They have the rosters right in that first page. So here we see it January 17th, 1991. The Minnesota North Stars played the Washington Capitals back then. In fact, Minnesota North Stars would actually win this game 5-2. I don't really have any statistics from it, but I guess you could probably look it up and figure out who scored and all that fun stuff. But here are your rosters for that night. And I'll actually go through kind of the whole front office and coaching and stuff, because I think it's kind of interesting. So there you see at the top, hard to tell, you have Vice President and General Manager Bobby Clarke, better known Hall of Famer from, of course, the Philadelphia Flyers, still a part of that organization. I believe he's kind of a consultant or ambassador now. Was a GM for the Flyers for a number of years too. Coach Bob Gainey, another Hall of Famer from, of course, Montreal Canadiens days. Considered one of the best defensive forwards of all time. He was the head coach of the North Stars. And assistant coach is Doug Jarvis, the guy who still holds the Ironman streak, over 900 games played consecutively. He was an assistant coach along with Andy Murray, who's your current head coach at the University of Western Michigan. And Chico Resch, longtime analyst now for the New Jersey Devils. I think he's still doing that, if I memory serves me correctly, along with Ken Danico. Trainers, Dave Stumpernot and Dave Smith, and equipment manager, Mark Baraboo. Look at our goalies there, Brian Hayward, who is now your current analyst actually for the Anaheim Ducks. He was a person we traded for, and John Casey, the Grand Rapids, Minnesota native, who would actually be kind of our go-to goaltender throughout the playoffs during that miracle run. Players, captain Kurt Giles, mentioned him, former University of Minnesota Duluth Star, also of course currently he's the head coach at Edina High School. Fantastic player, feisty player, even though he's 5'8", he played like a bigger guy. Rob Zettler, longtime NHL assistant coaches since his playing days have ended. Chris Dahlquist, the local kid out of Ridley. Neil Wilkinson, Brian Glenn, Neil Broughton, the famous, perhaps one of the most popular North Stars ever, local legend, really, in his own right. Jim Johnson, another local kid, also longtime assistant coach all throughout the league. This is also the father of Derek Johnson, who's now a scout, I believe. I think he just got signed on as a member of a scouting staff. Can't remember what an NHL team though. That just happened. Mike Modano, of course, the franchise, would eventually become the North Stars, Dallas Stars all-time leading scorer. Gaetan Duchesne, Doug Smale, Dave Gagne. I think he's still part of the development staff at Vancouver. His son Sam, you remember him? one of the better players for the North Stars at this point in time. Brian Propp, brought him over in a trade. He played a big role in the playoff run. Bobby Smith, first overall pick back, I believe, in 1979. Also been a lot of management in the league since then. Mike Craig, Perry Berezan, Ulf Dahlin, Brian Bellows, one of the top scorers in North Stars history, Mark Tenorti, Ilka Sinisalo, and Shane Churla, who we saw at the NHL draft, ironically this year in Dallas, as he announced Dallas's top pick. Or no, I think he's a scout for the Kings, but he came there to show his support in his former playing town. Washington Capitals, general manager David Coyle, who of course is your general manager of the Nashville Predators. Done a pretty good job there. Head coach Terry Murray, longtime Chicago Blackhawk player. They only had one assistant coach for the Capitals, just one, John Perpick. That was it. So coaching staffs are a little bit smaller back then. Now it's pretty routine to see maybe 3, maybe even 4 coaches if you count video coaches as part of the coaching staff of NHL teams. Trainers, Stan Long, and probably my favorite name I've ever seen in a program, especially for a trainer. The guy's name is Sluggo Shearer. Sluggo. That's not a name you see too often. You'd think he'd be that'd be a great hockey player name, but he's just a trainer. And equipment manager Woody Lading. But Sluggo Shearer, that sounds like a boxer somewhere. But anyways, goalies, Mike Liut, he's now been a player agent for a number of years. And then Don Beaupre, played a long time with the North Stars, now currently resides in Edina. He does financial work now. But Don Beaupre, definitely a person that North Stars fans would remember, because he kind of helped lead the North Stars, or was actually a pretty good player during the early 80s. Players for the Capitals, Mikhail Tatarynov, former Soviet player, Kevin Hatcher, which is the older brother, I believe, to Darian Hatcher. Darian Hatcher was still in junior hockey at this point. Kalle Johansson, longtime Capital player. I don't think he ever played for any other teams other than the Capitals, and he retired in like the late 90s. Nick Kypreos, you see him on Rogers Sportsnet all the time, popular analyst. Kelly Miller, Peter Bondra, famous player there. This would be like his rookie season. Getting off to a pretty good start. You can see he had 10 goals and 24 points in 42 games when they met the North Stars that day. Dave Tippett, a longtime former NHL coach. I think he does his summers up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. Alan May, Mike Ridley, John Druce, Michael Pavanka, Steve Leach, Dino Ciccarelli came back for this one. Another player that definitely North Stars fans probably were happy to see, even if he was playing against them. Mike Lawler, Bob Joyce, one of my favorite names, Dmitry Kristich, Dale Hunter, one of the guy who was both a pest but also a pretty good player in his own right. Really for fans that aren't familiar with Dale Hunter, he's pretty much was kind of similar to like Brad Marchand was for the Bruins, a guy who drove you nuts but also could beat you on the score sheet. So probably an underappreciated player, really. And then Al Iafrate, guy who owned the hardest slap shot for quite a long time, gets shot, just clocked at like 104 miles an hour. And that was before composite sticks, so that's pretty impressive. Not a guy you wanted to block a shot from back then. So, those are your current rosters. As we said before, the North Stars won this game 5-2 over the Washington Capitals. So, here's one of the most fascinating things I've read in a long time. And again, I want to thank Aaron for giving us a chance to share this with you guys. This is a Minnesota North Stars mid-season report. And basically this is a way the franchise is trying to let its fans know that it is working very hard to try to turn the fortunes of this team around, which had been pretty bad in the late 1980s going into the early 1990s. Couple things I just point out just from a marketing standpoint. Please note it has the newer logo up there where it still just said Stars. The famous N logo is not there. That might give you some hints as to how they're making some changes. Basically, this is, for lack of a better term, it's kind of like a parent-teacher conference for North Stars fans, where Norm Green and the North Stars lay out their thoughts, expectations, goals, as well as noting their failures in their efforts to try to get the franchise back towards respectability. And that was what I found kind of interesting about the whole article, the fact that it really went over very specifically what their goals were and what they felt places where they could improve. And I'm sure one could debate that they were spitting this to make the organization sound like it was doing everything it possibly could. And Norm Green, of course, with his used car salesman smile, certainly will probably make quite a few former North Stars fans just want to bite their lip or swear or flick off the computer screen. But that's a whole different thing. But I'll just let him say what was said. I'll read a couple things through here. I don't want to read the whole thing, even though I do believe this is a fantastic time capsule. So, biggest surprise from Norm Green, according to him in this article, number one, the support of the fans and their desire for our success. So apparently he was surprised that we supported the team and that we wanted them to succeed. I don't know how I should feel about that. Two, now here's one for you that'll also make you just North Stars fans, sorry. Don't throw anything through the screen because you want to watch the rest of this little podcast. Two, how perfect the Metz Center is for hockey. It's a great arena and comfortable with fantastic sight lines and incomparable ice. Now, in his defense, I will say that I actually asked on Twitter if anybody had the chance to skate on the Metz Center ice. A few of my followers said they had. I never got that opportunity myself, but most people remarked at the time Metz Center ice was actually considered one of the best ice surfaces in the league, bar none. So apparently that was something, again, that Norm Green didn't know about when he purchased the team. So, I've been to the games. I agree that there was not really too many bad seats in the arena. But it's funny that he calls it a perfect arena when, of course, a few years later he's saying, I need a new arena. So, perfect, I guess, for this small chunk of time, and then apparently he forgot about that part pretty quick. Biggest disappointment from Norm Green, only 5,200 people at the season opener. Ouch. 5,200. The capacity of Metz Center was right around 15,000. Depends on what source you see. Some say over 14,500. Some say as high as 16. I remember most of the top numbers were 15,300 about, and or 15,300, and but only 5,200 people at the season opener. Yeah, that would be disappointing. I don't even know what to say. That's pretty bad. Two, the lack of support from the corporate community. So apparently getting corporate people or corporations to jump on the North Stars bandwagon was not too good. May have had something to do with the fact that the Minnesota Timberwolves just arrived and people were wanting to get the new ticket in town. I don't know, maybe that's a little bit of wishful thinking on my part, or maybe some revisionist history, but that may have had something to do with it. And also, let's face it, the North Stars sucked for a really long time. And then lastly, number three, and I'll talk about this in a bit because I don't think people remember this, or at least if you're not old enough to have been around when the North Stars were, you probably never knew this, and you're probably going to think this is insane. The ineffectiveness, number three, was the ineffectiveness of the Star Stakes promotion. Star Stakes promotion was basically an attempt to try to fill up the lower bowl of Metz Center And basically, because there were so many empty seats for the higher priced seats, they basically offered kind of, I know it wasn't every game, but they would, I know they had it per game, but then they had like these, I'm gonna guess like almost quarterly big lotteries for like big time money, where there was a $250,000 prize at stake. And basically the hope was that people would buy up tickets, and if your ticket was chosen, then you would be the winner of whatever that, whether the nightly prize was, or if you're lucky in those quarterly drawings, you would be the big winner. And it's, you know, $250,000. You know, while that certainly isn't like your Powerball type winning, that's a life-changing thing. I mean, that's a significant amount of money. And so people, they had hoped that that would trigger people to purchase tickets. And what ended up happening with the Star Stakes was that people would buy maybe 3 or 4, spending like maybe $100 to get the 4 tickets. That gives you an idea how prices have changed since today. But they would buy those tickets and then find out, you know, the drawing would happen and know that, you know, the ticket that was chosen, there was nobody there, and so it wasn't really, you know, filling up the seats. So as much as they'd hoped that it would bring fans in there with this extra incentive to show up for the games, it didn't really turn out that way. And so it kind of was a lame duck promotion, even though, I don't know, it seems kind of like, I don't know, it's an interesting idea, desperate definitely, but that's what it was. Biggest lesson. Now this, again, North Stars fans, please don't swear too much at the screen. I guess you can, I'm not going to hear it, unless you tell me in the comments below, which would be fine. Biggest lesson, talk to the fans in the concourse before developing new marketing ideas. So in other words, apparently Norm Green states that he would walk around during the intermissions, during the game, and talk to fans and ask them what they wanted, and then he would write those ideas down, and some of those ideas he tried to implement. Now, I don't know, you know, he doesn't really say how many times he did this, or if this was something he did at every single game. He makes it sound like he was at every single game, but I don't know. If you're a fan out there and you talked to Norm Green and you gave him your 2 cents on the team, I'd love to hear what you said and what he said back to you. So leave that in the comment below, or tell me on Twitter at Creason Assist. But that's what he claims. And so the next thing you see there is a chart. The chart shows how, as the team started off the 1990-91 season, that the attendance started to improve because, go figure, the North Stars were winning games. And it was saying that by game 21, which you see at the end of the chart, they had over 7,000 paid attendance. Apparently, because the team was so bad, they actually were giving lots of seats away as freebies. So I don't know if it's as bad as like Florida, where you can get like a free oil change and tickets to a Florida Panthers game, but apparently they were giving away at least 3,000 tickets a night. And so they tried to basically get rid of the free tickets to find out, you know, really how much support they had, and they were doing better than they expected. And their goal was, by the end of 3 years, at least that's what he states in this article, that they would be 15,000 paid tickets each night at the Met Center. So that was his goal, saying that they kind of had a 3-year plan to turn this thing around. Give some talk about how Bobby Clark's adding better players, some upgrades to the arena, which were kind of well publicized. Now, I'm going to do this even though this doesn't work with the whole turn like each page and go through it. For strangely enough, this starts on the second page of the program, and then it continues on like the last page of the program, which is kind of weird. But basically, it talks again about some of their decision making. They also added electric stars. Maybe you remember this, kind of like a dance team. Apparently, it was made up of men and women, so it wasn't just scantily clad women or women in spandex parading around. But apparently, they also had a trumpeter to try to drum up support. I don't know if that was a fan idea, or if Norm Green just wanted to watch a bunch of hot women walk around. because we all know what happened with that later. But anyways, basically talks about some of the other things they tried, and that he's going to continue to try to turn this team into a success, and that he considers the fans the board of directors for the team. So it says right now we've got about 7,000 to 8,000 board of directors. I'd like to have 15,000 board of directors. Will you help me by becoming season ticket holders? So I don't know. Seems kind of cheesy, but I don't know. He's really trying to show you that he is trying very hard to help the team. It does also mention, I should point out, it says right here, and as of December 1st, the Stars are being heard on 14 radio station network that covers the whole state of Minnesota and western Wisconsin. More stations will be added next season. The much-rued Sports Channel agreement ends at the end of this season, and Green promises that a good television broadcast rights contract is a priority for next season. Sports Channel is like a really terrible experiment when they basically turned the North Stars into like a pay-per-view event, and that did not do very well, and people had a lot of problems with it. And so what they ended up doing was they basically got rid of it. But the thing I would just mention too is, note that he's not calling the team the North Stars anymore. He's referring to them as the Stars. So you're starting to see a very subtle change into how the team is kind of marketed. So that's Norm Green's 2 cents. Probably one of the most interesting things in this thing. I'll come back to this page again, but I won't talk about the Norm Green stuff. We'll talk about this really cool Northgate computer system ad, but that's a whole different deal. So, going back here, Budweiser. In fact, we saw the same ad being used on the Goal magazine from Let's Read 3. You can see the blank, which looks like a blank for the Winnipeg Jets, and the blank, of course, for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Then you have, and then after that, the interesting thing is, that's pretty much the program, those first pages we showed you. After that, this basically is a Minnesota hockey magazine. So in other words, the NHL part of it kind of just goes away for the most part, and it's mainly talking about other parts of Minnesota hockey, which is really interesting. And so it starts with a feature that is NHL related, and this is a big, long feature on GM Bobby Clarke. And he says there's no limit to the North Stars' future. It says the new GM retains the spirit, tenacity, and optimism. Basically kind of talking about how he takes the traits that made him a success as a player and how that's what he's looking for as a general manager of an NHL team. And as he said, I don't suppose I'll ever do anything else in my life I enjoy as much as playing hockey. And Bobby Clarke was a tenacious player, kind of like that I mentioned before, Brad Marchand. He was Brad Marchand in his day in the 70s, during the Broad Street Bully days of the Philadelphia Flyers. And he certainly didn't mind having a tenacious team like that. That was kind of what he instilled as a general manager. But the interesting thing is he talks pretty straight up about the Summit Series, which I'm sure Canadian fans love to hear about. He basically kind of states that when I broke Valeri Kharlamov's leg, that, hey, he punched me first, so I had to take him out of the lineup, so no regrets. That's pretty much what he stated. So Bobby Clarke, no regrets wasn't really Bobby Clarke's thing to have too many regrets. I think, I want to say it was Bobby Clarke that said something about Roger Nielsen saying it's not my fault he got cancer, which not a lot of sympathy there built into Bobby Clarke. That's just his no apology style. But anyways, he talks about some of the players, talks a little bit about Mike Modano, getting to know the personnel, kind of sounding a lot kind of like current Wild general manager Paul Fenton. And again, I gotta move around here a little bit, and here's some interesting quotes. It says, Broughton is a great player, having a great year. I hope he wants to play 4 or 5 more years. The funny thing is he talks about Modano, and Modano had been kind of treated like, you know, the wonder kid, the wonder child, and he goes, Modano? Who knows with kids like that? Some nights he's great, others he's not. Pretty pretty honest Bobby Clark type of discussion about the Wunderkind. I don't think the previous administration would have given Madonna much criticism, but Bobby Clark wasn't in awe of anybody. So kind of funny little read there. But anyways, this team went on to almost win the Stanley Cup, closest we ever came in Minnesota, and talks about some of his other moves, the reasons he made them and whatnot, and getting used to the job. So that was an interesting article, at least from his perspective, because Bobby Clark was himself a pretty candid interview, not what you normally get if you ever saw a program today. I don't think you'll see too many GMs criticize their organization, their team at all, because it's really meant just to be rah rah, go team go, and that's not Bobby Clark. So kind of cool article. Okay, see an article here, photo contest of the year, asking for people to send in hockey pictures to Minnesota Hockey Magazine, and if you win, you could win an opportunity to attend a Heartland Hockey Camp, which still exists. That's what you see down below here. Steve Jensen's Heartland Hockey Camp up in Deerwood, Minnesota is still around. Pretty much a Minnesota institution. And really, this is was the prototype of what your typical hockey camps are now. Whether, virtually every major Division I college holds hockey camps. It's very similar to like Heartland Hockey Camp. There's hockey camps all over Canada and other parts of North America, but the Heartland Hockey Camp was really kind of the prototype, a summer camp with indoor ice, talking about off-ice training, on-ice training, all that kind of stuff, and thousands of Minnesota kids every year attend his camps, so it's still going. Here we see an ad for Easton hockey sticks, and strange thing is there's two halves of this ad. The other half has, of course, Wayne Gretzky on it. Yeah, but for whatever dumb reason they split it up into two different pages. Kind of stupid on their part, but oh well. Here's another interesting article. This is another one again from Minnesota Hockey Mag that's a part of this program. It talks about St. Cloud State. St. Cloud State was just becoming a Division I program at this time. Right after Herb Brooks kind of got it going and then stepped away as soon as they became Division I. And the interesting part of this article is that this is very much an editorial. And this is from John Gilbert, and John Gilbert basically shreds St. Cloud State in this article because he is appalled at the fact that St. Cloud State did not live by a pledge to have basically only Minnesota-born players on St. Cloud State. And basically it's a prolonged rant trying to portray their coach, wait a second here, I think it's Mark Dahl, who was their longtime initial coach, as basically a liar for saying that he would only bring in Minnesotans to play on the team, and that the Minnesota State Legislature had given St. Cloud State a bunch of money to produce the National Sports Center where they play today, and that they gave them that money with the pledge that it would provide more opportunities for Division I hockey for Minnesota kids by having, of course, a third Division I school in the state at the time. You had, of course, Minnesota Duluth and University of Minnesota there already. So now, by saying you're going to bring in only Minnesota players, I guess that's how the Minnesota State Legislature justified handing over a bunch of money to the university. While St. Cloud State didn't just use Minnesota players, they brought in some Canadians. Well, that apparently really angered John Gilbert, who felt betrayed and just totally shreds Dahl and St. Cloud State for not giving Minnesota kids a fair chance to make the team, saying that basically it was a ploy just to get money from the state, and that it's really wrong. And and stating that other schools like Minnesota and Minnesota especially isn't all Minnesota team. Why can't St. Cloud State? And it does let Minnesota Duluth out the hook because apparently Minnesota Duluth never said they were just going to be Minnesota only. So it's okay because they never made that pledge, but for the St. Cloud State, they're apparently dirtbags because they dare do that. And, you know, being a person who's a fan of college hockey and have been a fan of Minnesota college hockey forever, there definitely is a lot of provincialism within some fans. They believe that, you know, we should only basically recruiting Minnesota players, while others say, hey, maybe it's time we start to expand out and bring in players from Europe or Canada to round out our team. And now with 5 Division I universities, you know, that's a lot of different places pulling at the talent that we produce in the state of hockey. So it's definitely a discussion that some fans just don't get over, and while others just roll their eyes. It's kind of a there's no gray area. People seem to either feel it's a valid argument, and other people think it's just ridiculous. So I'm more in the realm, get the best player. I don't care where they're from. So sorry if that makes you mad, Minnesota provincialists out there, but give it up. Just give it up. So we see the end of that Wayne Gretzky Easton had. I know he used a lot of different sticks, so I don't know, take it with a grain of salt. That was his stick of choice during that year. And they were still wood back then. So I'm sure today, for today's hockey player, they would think it was a lead weight. Here you have apparently another ad for Koho. You don't see Koho anymore as a brand, at least not that much. And here he is sitting out there with his hockey bag and his stick, and this woman is checking him out. Notice she's keeping a distance. Maybe the bag smells or something. If you've ever been on a hockey gear, you understand that. So she's taking notice of Koho Revolution. Here's another interesting article, and I do have an epilogue to this whole thing. This talks about global hockey. This was a venture to start up what was known as the Global Hockey League, the GHL, and they were going to have teams in the following places to try to have a truly international league. Places like that were going to get global league teams were Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Miami, Florida, Albany, New York, Atlanta, Georgia, Los Angeles, California. It says 2 Birminghams. There has been a team in Birmingham, Alabama, because they always want hockey in Birmingham, and England, in Birmingham, England, Milan, Italy, Barcelona, Spain, a hockey hotbed that is Barcelona. I'm being sarcastic. And Prague, Czechoslovakia, as well as St. Paul. So there was an attempt to do this. One of the guys that was a founder of this movement was called, his name was Dennis Murphy. For those of you that are familiar with the old World Hockey Association, back when you had teams like the St. Paul Fighting Saints and the Birmingham Bulls and the Toronto Toros, the Los Angeles Sharks. No, it was Los Angeles Sharks. The Cleveland Stags, a whole bunch of weird teams. Dennis Murphy was a part of that league, and go figure, he's trying to start another rogue hockey league. And one of the interesting things was the guy that was leading up the Minnesota Investment Branch was a guy named Pat O'Halloran, and his day job was as a mortician. Maybe that was a bad sign, that a mortician is your league. So when this league, for a lame dad joke, decided to push up daisies, maybe it was time to put an end to the whole idea of having a rogue hockey league out there. But I remember again in the early 2000s, after the first lockout, they wanted to have a new World Hockey Association that never got off the ground either. So there's always someone that wants to try something else, that whole new, I guess they're bringing the XFL back now. I don't know why, but whatever. Everyone wants to think they can compete, but pretty tough to do that. So, anyways, talking about how he believes there's enough fans out there and around the world that they can get it going. So, without all the background of what he believes how this would work for Minnesota, they wanted to play out at the St. Paul Civic Center, which of course is your current site of the Xcel Energy Center, former home of the St. Paul Fighting Saints. And they wanted to get guys like Glenn Sonmore involved. So I mean, it really would have been like reliving the old WHA days. But it didn't happen. Ultimately, owners within the league had a hard time figuring out how they were going to make it work, because the distances between the teams were so ridiculous. You know, I mean, you have a league that goes from Prague, Czechoslovakia to Los Angeles. I don't even want to think of what the flight times would be for that, the game times, all that weird stuff. And so ultimately the owners had different ideas how the league should be run, and so they decided to postpone their initial season, which would have started in 1990, I believe, and hold it off for a year. And after a year, it was not any better, so they just said, I think we're gonna forget about it. And so the league died a death without ever really being a league. It was more just an idea, but I don't know. Would it have worked? I'm not too. I think it probably was dead before it started, and history proved that to be true. International Hockey Camp. We have another one here. This is run at Bemidji State. That was back when Bemidji State was a Division III program, not a Division I program like it is today. And even for a Division III program, you can see that they have different camp options for kids. So even smaller schools like Bemidji State at the time were holding hockey camps and things. Here we have another advertisement for if you want to subscribe to Minnesota Hockey Magazine, which still exists today. In fact, there was a lot of features with coaches from guys like Doug Woog at the University of Minnesota and Mike Surdich at UMD, and other, instructional kind of stuff. And you'll kind of see that throughout this program a little bit. This one's Dominic Grillo. It's about a guy who runs an outdoor rink up in Hibbing. Apparently they have 8 outdoor rinks in Hibbing for kids to play on in the wintertime. And Dominic Grillo runs this one called the Greenhaven Rink, or he did. And here he is, like a 76-year-old guy, and it's pretty much like a labor of love. And apparently that's where all the kids in Hibbing wanted to play on. They were playing outdoors. His ice was the best, and he always made sure it was top-notch all the time. And so it's kind of a story to a guy who's dedicated to the grassroots part of the game. Kind of a cool classic story. Considering he's 76, I'm pretty sure he's no longer here with us anymore. But this is the kind of story you'd see like on Hockey Day Minnesota if they ever had one up in Hibbing, which they probably should. I mean, it's a historic place of the game, that or Eveleth. So, anyways, that's that. Here's a poem. This big, massive poem, which was kind of a poem that was supposed to spin off the idea of NBC used to have a fictional cartoon character to try to teach the game, because a lot of people in the United States don't have a lot of first-hand knowledge or connection to hockey. They see it on television, but they've never played it. It's not as much part of the culture as, like football or baseball. And so they had a thing called Peter Puck, and Peter Puck would give little short instructionals talking about the basic rules and aspects of the game. And so this guy made a poem about, apparently it's Peter Puck's cousin, Patty Puck, and they made this really long poem. Do you want me to? I guess I could read this thing. I'll read parts of it. It says, "The lifestyle of a hockey puck is very tense indeed. Guys bash and smash and rough you up, no matter how you plead. They crush you in the corners and bounce you off the boards and kick you with their hockey skates, whose tips are sharp as swords. The sweaty hands of linesmen have a gucky, slimy feel, And those pile-ups in the corners, phew, the stench is just unreal. But any puck will tell you the worst abuse of all is the time spent in the freezer, in the frigid torture hall. The idea is that frozen pucks lie better on the ice, though no one's ever thought to ask a puck for his advice. Apparently they're male pucks, there's no female pucks out there. Sexist. Before the game, a bunch of us are shoved into this cell. Believe me, when the door slams shut, it's the next worst thing to hell. I'm sure that was a racy line they debated about back then. It's cold as heck. The only thing a shivering puck can do is close his eyes and try to catch a wink of sleep or two. One night I dreamed of an errant shot had put me in the crowd. The guy whose hand I landed in chortled long and loud. He gave me to his girlfriend in hope of making points, and she took me home to her place, the most elegant of joints. I'm sure they meant like place to live, not smoking. Anyways, her boudoir was so peaceful, and the decor so sublime, a far cry from the locker room with all that sweat and grime. She put me on her dresser, on a pile of lingerie that had a subtle sweetness like spice from old Cathay. I wish I could pan this camera over to see my wife who I'm reading this, and she's shaking her head pretty bad at that last line. She left, and then I heard a voice from an open drawer below. I whispered, "Psst," and I peered down through a wondrous and rosy glow. When my eyes were in the back in focus, I beheld this lovely thing, the most gorgeous puck I'd ever seen. My heart began to sing. "Come down, hun," she urged me, and I rolled to the dresser's brink. But as I fell, I woke up, in dark, as black as ink. The freezer was deserted. I'd missed the wake-up call. I thought, but for this icy air, I wouldn't mind at all. I tried to resurrect my dream and had just dozed away when the doggy hand of sweating Jet reached in for an ice cube tray. "What are you doing here?" he roared and hauled me into the light, then carried me off to rinkside, resisting with all my might. He plopped me down atop the pile, so when the next they needed a puck, I was the one the linesman grabbed. I swore at my rotten luck. He slammed me down on a face-off, and the centers whacked at my head. A Los Angeles wing got his stick on me and fed me up ahead. A lanky dude corralled me there and dribbled round a Jet, then passed me off to a Los Angeles teammate who drilled me into the net. You wouldn't believe the cheering the Jet crowd gave that score. Usually goals by the other team are something fans abhor. It was only the latter, they told me, why fans nearly trashed the joint. The lanky guy, Wayne Gretzky, notched his 2000th point. So now they say I'm headed for the Hockey Hall of Fame. I'm glad because I've had enough of this rowdy hockey game. If they put me in a display case, on a cushion, soft, no seams, I'll be glad to spend the rest of my life dreaming puckish dreams. The end. So that's the dream story of Patty Puck. I hope you enjoyed that wonderful poem by Gary Bartness of Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. Those are definitely a bard, a wordsmith. Classic. Okay, got another article. Paul Broughton, we talked about him in our last Let's Read article because in that last Let's Read, the Minnesota North Stars played the New York Rangers, and Paul Broughton was a part of that team and talking about how he's making kind of a life for himself where he's not just seen simply as, oh, that's Neil Broughton's brother. Which I'm sure was probably a challenge because Neil Broughton was pretty popular as a player who won a national championship with the Gophers, won a gold medal. I was part of the Miracle on Ice team in 1980 and really was a Minnesota legend even almost before he became an NHL player. So it's talking about, being a kid that played, University of Minnesota, and so he made his way, what's it like playing in New York City, the big city life compared to, living in the small town of Roseau, Minnesota, which is maybe like 4,000 people, I think. In Roseau, not very many people, so life in the biggest city and on the big stage of Madison Square Garden. There you see a little ad there at the bottom. Radio home of the Minnesota North Stars at the AM 1500. Still around, but they're not the radio home of the Minnesota Wild. That, of course, is 100.3 KFAN. So, since this is the Minnesota Hockey Mag, this does talk prominently about college hockey. We already mentioned St. Cloud State and their dastardly plan to not just recruit Minnesota players, but this talks about the number 1 ranked Minnesota Golden Gophers. And for a long time, Minnesota Golden Gophers were considered, and still some people still call it that, the Minnesota's pride on ice. It's used to be kind of their slogan. Because really the North Stars were so bad, in most cases no one wanted to take too much credit for them. But the Golden Gophers always seem to be a contender all the time. And people like winning, and it's easy to like winning. So anyways, the Minnesota Golden Gophers were ranked number 1 in the nation, and they're saying this is the year for an NCAA championship, isn't it? So they wanted to see if this was a year for them to win the national title, saying that there's no reason they shouldn't. It says, in this quote, it says, "A team of every-nighters that never fails to play competitive, entertaining hockey." And I have to admit, in the late 80s and early 90s, I was following Minnesota Golden Gopher hockey probably more so than the North Stars at this point. So, and I doubt I was alone. I bet you Gopher games probably drew better than the North Stars did. And as my dad will often try to tell you, there were times where the North Stars and the Gophers would play one another, and sometimes the Gophers would win. So people looked at it as not just, a team that would win, but a team that could actually beat an NHL team, which is pretty remarkable. And again, the whole all-Minnesota team, that's another reason why some people believe that's like the panacea for all the problems, is just add more Minnesota guys. And this is when they were pretty much an all-Minnesota squad. Ben Hankinson, he's a player agent right now. You can see his picture there in the upper corner. I'm sure some of his clients would love to see the picture of their agent sitting there with his Minnesota Hockey Magazine hat. Ben and his brother Pete were fantastic players for the Golden Gophers. Other guys in there would be like Trent Klatt, Corey Leyland, Chris McAlpine, and talking about how they just had all the talent, and that they were getting close to winning a national title. I do not believe, I'm 100% sure they did not win in 1990. I'm 100% positive about that. I think the last year they got to the title until the early 2000s with Don Lucia was, I believe, 1989, and they lost to Harvard. I remember watching that game on television. The infamous Randy Skarda shot off the post, which haunted Gopher fans for about 20 years until Grant Patolny buried the game winner in 2002 at St. Paul, no less. So there you see it. They're thinking that the Gophers are a shoo-in. In fact, it goes to say that pretty much they almost seem to think like it's guaranteed they're going to win at all. They just think that they had too many weapons and that no one can compete against them, which is pretty arrogant. And that's the reason why some fans don't like Gopher fans or Gopher hockey in a way, because they kind of expect to be good all the time, and they're kind of seen as kind of the golden boys, literally and figuratively. I'm trying to think where their season ended in 1990. Yeah, they got beat in the quarterfinals. They lost to Providence. Or no, wait, no, it's not Providence. They lost to Maine. Or no, wait. Yeah, they lost to Maine in the second round. So didn't go as far as they hoped. So we'd have to wait a little while before we got our championship. A couple little ads here. Red Roof Inns, which you would see near like part of all over the city. Minnesota hockey camps again. These are based up in Brainerd, so a lot of different opportunities if you want to train. There's your schedule. Alabama Huntsville's on here, which that actually kind of surprises me that they were there that far back then. So Alabama Huntsville's been around for quite a while. This one talks about Division II hockey and how for schools like Bemidji State and then known as Mankato State, now of course Minnesota State, Mankato, they were thinking about going to Division II. I don't think that ended up quite happening. I remember when I was at going to college, and we played Bemidji State. I went to a Division III college. I went to University of Wisconsin River Falls, and they played Bemidji State in their last year in Division III. And the next year they went up to Division I. So, and that's I'm pretty sure that's a similar path that Mankato traveled as well. But basically talking about how that could disrupt, the smaller college hockey. And yet there was, people wanted to add more Division I opportunities, like we already mentioned with St. Cloud State before, and of course now those two schools are Division I. Here's another interesting kind of ad. This is an ad for the all-time all-tourney team for the Minnesota State Boys Hockey Tournament, which is kind of it's an annual pilgrimage for a lot of hockey fans in the state. And basically it's a listing of all these guys saying, who would you put on the all-time tournament team? And I think every time there's a tournament, people try to figure out what this team would be. And it's kind of interesting. You can see Max Oshie of Warroad, which I believe that is TJ Oshie's grandpa. You can see that name on there. Joe Micheletti, who's now an analyst for the New York Rangers. You can see his name on there. I'm trying to think if anybody else pops off my list that maybe people would know in general. Oh, Tom Kerbers, now current assistant general manager of the Minnesota Wild. He was a stud player at Bloomington Jefferson. Phil Housley, famous player because he literally went from high school to the NHL and not only did well but thrived as a high school kid, making the jump. He played for South St. Paul and now of course is the head coach for the Buffalo Sabres. Tim Sheehy, that's Neil Sheehy I'm thinking of. Never mind, forget about it. But yeah, kind of an interesting little list to page through. Okay, we have Marvin Doors and Windows, based out of Hockeytown, USA in Warroad, Minnesota. Marvin Windows, still there, and still I think probably the biggest employer probably in Warroad. Marvin family as a whole is an unbelievable heritage in hockey. Most recently with Cal Marvin's his granddaughter Gigi Marvin winning a gold medal with Team USA at the Olympics this year in Pyeongchang, which is pretty awesome. But anyways, Minnesota institution, kind of something you'd expect to see. Now here's something. This is I'll actually give a shout out on this one. This would be to at Lou Dog and at Carl East Hockey on Twitter, both Duluth East guys. And this is a Duluth East feature in the Minnesota High School magazine. It says, anonymous Duluth East guys wants to be known as winners. And it shows their coach, Mike Randolph. And for anybody, even if you follow high school hockey in the state of Minnesota, just marginally, you probably know the name Mike Randolph and Duluth East. They've been pretty much an institution, and really talking about how Mike Randolph was wanting to turn his team into a perennial powerhouse, and this is right in the cusp as Randolph is going to take the Duluth East Greyhounds into that, I guess, that tier of elite Minnesota high school hockey programs, and he has accomplished what he set out to do. He said the coach said his team can play any style and adapt to other teams' style of play, which I can tell you that's been Duluth East's mantra forever, that they can play any way they need to win. It says we've got experience and we should have a lot of speed, so if we can stay healthy and keep working, we feel we'll be a good hockey team by the end of the year. I think you can take just about any Duluth East season and hear that quote, because they are a team that perennially starts off slow, but then by the time you get to tournament time in basically the section playoffs, Duluth East is right in the thick of it, and then soon, there they are in the state tournament. Every year it seems like that's the story, and since Mike Randolph's been there, they won 2 titles in 1995 and 1998. Thanks Lou Dog for that stat. And they've been close a number of times. But they're definitely a team that always seems like they're there, much at my high school's chagrin. My high school being Elk River High School. They know what it feels like to be runner-up in their section seemingly forever, unfortunately. But he's done a heck of a job there, and I think it's just really cool to see an article that kind of predicts what really ended up happening in the future. Then we see a shoe repair thing. I guess you could also get maybe your skates repaired because it's like shoe and leather. You don't see too many places like that anymore. Now, this next one is a goalie feature, which you don't see too many goalie features, and this is talking about coaching your goalie. And the guy that's talking about it is an Elk River native, former University of Minnesota goalie and goalie coach, Paul Osby. Paul's brother actually used to be my bus driver as a kid. He was a great man. But anyways, Paul Osby was a long-time Gopher goalie coach. I still think he runs a goalie camp. And basically saying, just because your team may not have a coach that knows how to play goalie or has a lot of experience with it, he says there's simple things you can do to basically help train goalies. And it basically gives you a whole bunch of different little drills or concepts that try to keep your goaltender engaged and practiced. And a couple of interesting ones I'll highlight because I'm not going to read them all. It actually suggests that you work with your goalies, you actually assign a specific person just to be their coach, whether they know it or not, and that they work on very specific skills. Like if they're just going to work on rebound control, that's all they do for that one practice. The next one might be steering pucks to the corners or playing the puck behind the goal. But the one thing that he also mentions is that you should they said one day should be set where the goalie actually plays as a skater and have the goalies actually go through all the conditioning drills of the other skaters. So just because he's a goalie doesn't mean that he gets out of doing all the, if you're having the kids do Kirby's and stuff like that. No, he's doing them right alongside the rest of the team. And not only that, he also plays forward during maybe like scrimmages every now and then, so that they say he gains a greater appreciation for what the skaters do for him. So maybe the goalie doesn't get so moody or nasty towards his teammates when he understands what it's like to do their job, I guess. Which I thought that was pretty interesting comment from Paul Osby. The other thing it mentions too is that you need to have drills where they keep the goaltender moving. And the other thing he said was don't just have drills where the goalie has to fail, meaning you don't just keep shooting pucks until you finally put one past him. Allow the goalie to win every now and then so that he doesn't feel like a loser all the time. And I know that may sound really touchy-feely, but I think there is something to be said for that. I know you want your guys to score, but you also want your goalie to have success too, because ultimately at the end of the day, he's the person that you need to, bail you out and win games and help, maybe steal games you don't deserve. So I think that's another interesting idea from Paul Osby there. And mind you, this magazine is almost 30 years old, but I think that's pretty valid. And I think especially if you're a youth hockey coach and you don't have anybody on your if the coaching staff doesn't have anybody that ever played goalie, you could use these things, and I think they would be just as relevant today as they were back then 30 years ago. So pretty cool little feature there, and I think I wish more programs would teach coaches how to coach. I think that would be good for everybody. Some other local sponsors that chipped into Minnesota Hockey Magazine. I would say a lot of these companies maybe don't even exist anymore, so I'm not going to read them through, but you can see it there. Then they have a newsletter inside this as well for the Minnesota Amateur Hockey Association. So they talk about different people that are important to that. Junior Gold, which is always kind of a thing if you don't make high school teams. In some places you play Junior Golds. Edina's Junior Gold team is kind of nationally famous because even though these are kids that quote-unquote didn't make Edina, they're like better than most high school teams in the country. It's kind of interesting. Another one talking about Grand Rapids, how they play outdoors. You don't have to play your games indoors. You can save money by playing outdoors. It's cheaper. Sure, it's seasonal, but you can do that. And then here's an interesting one, and again, I think I'm actually going to read this whole thing because I think it's important. This is called The Referee's Side. And I really love this article because I think you could reprint this in every hockey publication ever. And they should just keep it in there. It says, an open letter to a hockey parent. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you well. It was in mid-December. Your son's team was playing a youth game at Ramsey County Rink. It was a pretty interesting game. Your son's team had 9 guys going against a team that ran a full set of players. Despite being outnumbered, which by the full set of players would be about 18 or 19 kids. Despite being outnumbered and getting a series of penalties, some due to inexperience and some, I would guess, due to fatigue, your son's team worked to gain a 2-0 lead after a period. Game officials usually find a parent to help run the penalty box. We found one just before game time. I can totally relate to that situation. I guess you decided he needed some help. I guess you decided he needed some help. Late in the second period, I heard a voice above the cheering and encouragement that is so common at a youth game. You said, "Open up your eyes, you idiot. Watch the effing high sticks." I thought it was just another voice from the stands. But then I realized that there were no seats on that side of the ice, merely because players' benches in the penalty box. I knew it was an adult voice. I had to find out who was doing the hollering. You see, I was one of the referees. A guy paid $15 to keep order, so just $15 a game. After another penalty, you had plenty to say. "Watch the effing charging, ref," you hollered once. There was more language better suited to a wharf dispute. The period ended. It was when we had our brief conversation. I was the guy who asked that the penalty box door be opened and made the following request. "If you're going to stand in here and watch the game, sir, would you please refrain from swearing?" You replied, "I'll say anything I want. Why don't you watch the effing high sticks?" So I said, "Look, I can't have you standing in there yelling at us." I said, "If you want to do that, go back to the stands." Your response wasn't exactly complimentary. Then I snapped, "If you think you can do a better job, grab some skates and get out here. But for now, get the hell out of the penalty box." I apologize for losing my temper. The first thing that an official must never do is lose his or her temper. But I won't apologize for asking you to leave the penalty box. You responded by slamming the penalty box door hard. I was lucky to get out of the way of the door. The game went on, and your son's team won 4-3. Later, my partner and I sat in the first aid room and reviewed the day's activities. We had worked 3 games and earned $45. My partner had ejected a player who bumped him in an argument, and I got hit hard by a deflected shot, and verbally by you. I'll be willing to bet my $15 wage that what many of your son's team will remember from that game is not that they played with just nine guys and won against a team with a full roster. I bet your son will remember for a long time the sight of his father being asked by the referee to leave the penalty box. To that, I add one last thought. Was it really worth it? No. That's one hell of a letter. And like I said, you see it at more arenas, you see it in gyms, at high schools and whatnot, talking about, let the players play, the coaches coach, and something like that. I can't remember the rest of the phrase, but basically saying, relax. It's just a sport. It's just a game. It's not the end of the world, and basically kind of back off. And I think refs have a tough job, and especially with pro sports and instant replay and everything, everyone thinks they're an expert. And, while I can say I've not been a part of this kind of activity, thankfully, I've definitely heard people that have been a part of it, unfortunately, and it's ridiculous. And as I said, I would reprint this letter. Refs probably get paid more than $15 to do a game now, hopefully. I wouldn't do it for $15. But beyond that, I think it's just as accurate now as it was 30 years ago. So, anyways, I just thought that was a great article. Unexpected, but 100% on the money. TV stars. This basically talks about different games that are going to be on KMSP Channel 9. When to watch them, you get to hear, I think it's Doug McLeod and Tom Reed do the game, which is what I remember watching all the time as a kid. Talking about some dates there. Okay, Canadian hockey sticks. Showing all the different parts of a hockey stick. The fiberglass wrap, the birch wood that was inside of it. Again, this thing probably weighed a ton. In fact, I know I have a fiberglass stick myself, and yeah, it weighs a ton compared to the composite sticks players use today. But yeah, that was considered a top-of-the-line stick back then. Again, more college hockey stuff, kind of a roundup of the WCHA, the long-loved and greatly missed by a lot of fans WCHA instead of the Big Ten Hockey Conference. Talking about where guys are going after school. Like after their college hockey careers done, they're going on to play in the NHL or the minors or things like that. So kind of a summary of all that stuff. There's that Bobby Clark continued ad. This is an interesting ad. This is for the U.S. Coast Guard. I don't think I've ever seen a U.S. Coast Guard ad ever in a written publication. This is saying maybe you can help save lives and catch smugglers. Join the Coast Guard. Okay, kind of America's forgotten military service. And then we have another one, a Cunningham sports ad, the only color sports ad that you see in this publication. Okay, showing some local hockey guys with their stuff and saying you can get that stuff there. Okay, here's a caption of the Zambonis working at St. Cloud's Arena. You can see KNSI, which is the St. Cloud radio station. Miller, which is of course the big dealership in St. Cloud. And talking about, so exciting that there's college hockey in St. Cloud. Stroh's, Minnesotans' forgotten beer. This was my dad's go-to brand that when they were like these navy blue cans. I don't think it was a very tasty beer, but at the time it had a following, and my dad was one of those Stroh's worshipers. So sorry about that. I don't know what really happened to Stroh's. I don't know if they got absorbed by Shell. But they're no longer. I haven't seen Stroh's probably since I was in high school. So that was a beer back then. Then we have AAA, little AAA ad. Winston cigarettes, yeah. Now, I didn't note this last time, but now I noticed it this time. Surgeon General's warning. Now, we normally would associate that with saying that smoking causes cancer or something like that. This is what it says.
Surgeon General's warning. Cigarette smoke contains carbon monoxide. That's like a Captain Obvious thing to say, like, smoke's bad. You know, not that it gives you cancer or anything, of course that's what it says now, but it causes carbon monoxide. Go figure. Another ad for Northgate Computers. I think this is the precursor, I believe, to Gateway Computers. And so this is saying where you can get one of these advanced, highly sought after Northgate computer systems. This is what IBM and Compaq computers don't want you to know. And talking about how you can get this thing in the following processors: a 286, oh yeah, a 386, or if you're like my first computer, a 486. I'm sure it was probably like 25 megahertz, maybe 33, with a modem that maybe operated at like 28.8 millibaud per second. Top speed. Now, for you kids out, for you young people out there, just look up the word modem, and that's the whole thing where it makes the weird electronic sound that you had to work through like the phone lines. Yeah, those are the days, my friend. Those are the days. So there's that advertisement. And then lastly, the official sponsor of the Minnesota North Stars, Pepsi, the choice of a new generation. So there you have it, folks. Minnesota North Stars program, January 17th, 1991. Again, we'd like to thank Aaron at AngryFinn on Twitter for sharing this with us. It's been a fantastic trip down memory lane. And also, we'd also like to thank CGQ Quarterly, Chris Alamo, for kind of the idea of the Let's Reads. They've been kind of a fun trip for us. And also, I'd like to thank my partner in crime, Minnesota 24, Teresa. She did the first 2 Let's Reads. I've done the last 2, and it's been a lot of fun. So hope you enjoyed watching. If you got anything to say about Let's Reads you'd like to see us try to do, or if you want to leave a comment or 2, you can tell us on Twitter at Crease and Assist, or in the comments section below. See you later.